Hello everyone, my name is Beetle and today we are going to be starting off this brand new channel with an April reading wrap up. And before we do, I feel the need to defend the ratings I'm about to give. So essentially, when I was 13-14, I read a lot, mainly the Hunger Games and like the Maze Runner stuff, YA stuff, and then I stopped reading until this year I got into BookTube. And I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot of really good books that I'm really missing out on. So I went out and bought a bunch. And then I started reading them April. So this month as I'm recording this, but not this month when you're watching it. And I really just bought stuff that I was positive I would like. So like I've seen Game of Thrones, so I figured I would probably like anything in the Game of Thrones universe. The Everlasting, I like Lady Knights. So like I'll probably like that. Plus I read the first 3 Hunger Games books when I was younger, loved those. And I'm currently rereading them as an adult now. So I was like, okay, of course I'm gonna get The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping. And then stuff like Dracula, yeah, I'd probably like that. Lord of the Rings, I love Lord of the Rings, so I'll probably like The Hobbit, you know. So I really only bought books that I was positive I was gonna like. And I'm doing that preface because almost everything I read this month was a 5-star. Which I think is, you know, probably the best reading month I'm ever going to get because I only read things I was positive I would like. And now going off from this, it's gonna be stuff that I'm not that sure about. The only book that is not on the shelf, as you're seeing it, is The Will of the Many, which I am currently in the middle of reading, as well as The Hobbit and Frankenstein, I'm in the middle of reading. Everything else that's not mentioned in this video has not been read except The Hunger Games. So, and Sansuk, but we can ignore Sansuk. That's up there just because I don't have anywhere else to put those books. So I'm slowly making my way through all of these books. So I guess let's just get straight into it. The first thing I read in April was The Hedge Knight by George R.R. Martin. Sorry, it's really hard to say with my accent. George R.R. Martin, which is the first book in a trilogy called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Of course, the TV show came out recently and it seemed really good. And I wasn't going to make the same mistake I did with Game of Thrones, which is that I've seen Game of Thrones, I really like it, except for the decline later on, obviously, but I know for a fact that I'm gonna like the books more, so I kind of wish I hadn't seen it before reading the books. Although, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe I can get both things that I really like. I can have a TV show I like separate from the books if I just read the books and then watch the TV show. Let's not talk about that. But with this, I'd heard that the adaptation was actually really good. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll read the books first this time. And I'm really glad I did because I think definitely The Hedge Knight, the first one, is I think currently my favorite book of all time. Obviously not a lot to go off of, but it's just so cozy and nice, and it made me cry many times just from happiness of it existing. It was really good. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, of course. I do not have my stats on when I read it, but I read it all in one day, in one sitting, and then after read the whole, or watched the whole TV show, which is also pretty good. I had some complaints, but, you know, it is really good, and it is a faithful adaptation up until the end, which I thought was weird, that they kept it really faithful right until the last bit of it, where they kind of changed some things that I didn't love, but I'm not going to spoil that. Wasn't crazy changes, but I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting. But the book is so good. It is about, you know what, I should have had the books beside me. 1 second. Okay, since this is my first video, I'm not sure really how I want to do certain things, so I don't know, do I want to read out the back or do I want to explain it to you? So basically we're following this knight called Dunk, who, or knight in quotes, I guess, who really wants to make a name for himself. He was originally a squire, and then the hedge knight he was serving passed away, so now he's like, okay, I want to be a proper knight, or really I think he just needs money for things, so he wants to go to a tournament, there we go, a tournament to like get money and get notoriety, get his name out there. He wants to be a hedge knight like the guy that he served for so long. I'm really bad at explaining things. He gets to the tournament and things go bad. Things don't go great. On the way there, though, he meets this little kid called Egg, and he picks up this little kid and kind of very unwillingly brings the kid around with him to the tournament, and the kid becomes his squire. And that's kind of all I can say without spoiling everything. But yeah, they go to the tournament and things go wrong. Things don't go as great as he would have wanted to. It's really good, very good. I cried many times, like I said. It's just so wholesome and sweet. It's very different than any other Game of Thrones book. I haven't read them yet, obviously, but I have read most of Fire and Blood. I haven't completely finished it, but obviously knowing the general story of Game of Thrones, obviously I'm missing a lot of information, but this book is much less grand. It's not huge stakes. It's pretty big stakes, really, the first book when you actually stop and think about it, but it's not crazy. It's not world ending or like dragons or like White Walkers. It's very chill and fun and just a nice little adventure, and I'm so glad that this was essentially the first new book that I read as an adult, getting into reading again, because it's just so nice, and it was an immediate 5 stars, and it's just so good and wholesome and nice and sad, but very much more wholesome than I think that Game of Thrones is going to be. There's not really much that I could say without spoiling a lot of it, because I do think some parts are much better seeing in the book than finding out through here. So I'm not going to spoil it, though. If you guys would prefer videos where I spoil the book, I'd also love to do that. That's my preferred kind of video about books, is the one where they go in depth and spoil the whole thing. But I wasn't going to do that for a book that I had already read. That's kind of more of a style of, while you're reading it, you spoil stuff. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, let me know. But for now, I'm not going to spoil this book. I'm just going to leave that there. The second one is The Everlasting, the second book that I read this month. The Everlasting. I also give this 5 stars. Let me go grab it. So The Everlasting, it is a standalone fantasy, which was something I was really in the mood for when I was looking at different books. Fantasy is my main genre that I love. It's also what the book that I'm writing is, a fantasy, so I thought that would make the most sense. I'd love to branch out to different types of genres, but I'm getting back into reading because that's like the biggest writing advice that everyone agrees on, is that if you want to be a writer, you need to read, which I 100% agree with. Not that I haven't been reading, I've just been reading fan fiction because it felt much safer than, buying something new. But, you miss out on so many good things if you do that. So I was looking for kind of a standalone, less hard to get into, something that's not going to be a huge commitment, and I'm really glad I did, though I fear that it's going to be a commitment to this author, and I'm going to read everything she ever writes. The main draw to me was the fact that it's about a female knight, which is immediately like, if I'm going to pick up, romantasy isn't really my thing, I don't really like romance stories, but if I'm going to do it, it better be a lady knight. It can't be anything else. It has to be a lady knight, which is why the second Death of Locke is the only other romantasy I have, if that even counts, I'm not sure. But this is also a big thing to me, was that when I bought it, I thought that Alex E. Harrow was a man, and so I didn't pick this book up for months, and then I found out Alex E. Harrow was a woman, and I was like, oh, okay, now this is actually going to be good then. And I'm glad I picked it up because it's really fucking good. So many people recommend it as being like, it's so good. There's not much to even really say. So it's about this figure, this woman called Una Everlasting, and she was sort of this knightly figure in like tales, sort of like Joan of Arc or like Arthur of the Round Table, people like that we know them in real life as like legends and stories, and you're not really sure if they ever existed, but probably did in some capacity, even if the stories aren't true. Though I give bad examples, because Joan of Arc we do know definitely existed. Anyway, that sort of person where you're kind of like, is it just stories or is it real? Stuff like that. She's kind of like the poster of the wars. She's the, you know, when people show like war propaganda posters, she's the one that's on them all. And we're following this man called Owen Mallory, who is set, it's kind of, I'm not really sure when in the real world it would be, but they have technology just not very advanced as now. But he is a soldier fighting in a war, or he was a soldier. He's out of the war now, and it's about his story about her, the way that he views her, the way that he lives his life based off of her. He completely like falls in love with the tale of her. And does it say it on the back? Okay, it kind of says it on the back. There is time travel involved. He goes back in time to her time to do something. And that's all I can kind of say. All you really need to know is there's time travel, and these two are in love, and she is a badass lady knight, kind of akin to Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones. Kind of how I was pitching her the whole time. It's really good. It's not even just about that. I've found a lot of themes of racism and the differences between how you look, where you were born, the way that you're raised, the people who raise you, what all of that means to you, stuff like that. I found it was a really powerful story. I again cried many times, which I feel like is maybe my my barrier for whether or not it was amazing. Is like, did I cry? If I did cry, then it was great. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars as well. It was absolutely phenomenal. I'm glad it was the second book that I had read as an adult, because it is really, really good. If you haven't read this, you really should. It's just amazing. So then the second book that I read is A Sworn Sword by George R.R. Martin. Again, I can't say his name. I'm really sorry. George R.R. Martin. The Sworn Sword. This one I liked a little less. A big thing was that I picked it up right after reading the first book, but then did not finish it until like 2 weeks ago. So there was like 3 weeks between picking it up and putting it down. So I kind of was not in the flow of it when reading it anymore. I did finish it all in one sitting after that big break. I read like 30 pages and then took a break and then read the last pages. I did really like it. As I'm sitting here, I think it deserved a 5 in my scale in my head, but I gave it a 4.5 just because I was less into it. But it's even lower stakes somehow than the first one. Following Dunk and Egg again, but this time there is a drought. They're kind of working for this lord, and there's a drought, and they really have no water for their crops or anything. Everyone's kind of dying of thirst. It's really hot, and they have no water basically. And then they discover that even without the drought, which is happening, there's it's drying up all the rivers, but on top of that, somebody has dammed the river so that they're getting no water at all now. And it's just kind of about that. I really think I should change this to a 5 out of 5. I'll leave it at a 4.5 because I really believe in keeping it the rating that I immediately felt when I finished it. But God, some of the characters in this are phenomenal. I'm really excited to see them adapt it for this show, especially with the cast that they've got. There's a girl in this who I love so much. She's so cool. I think the ending maybe was a little bit disappointing to me. Not that I don't know. I don't know where I thought it was going. I didn't think it would end like that. And it was kind of funny, but in a sort of out of place way. I just felt bad for some people at the ending. I think it was meant to be funny, but I was just like, oh, well, that's sad. So I can't really say what that was, but if you've read it, then you know what I mean by that. But overall, I did still really like it. I think on a reread, it would be a 5 out of 5. It was just because of that big gap, and also the ending was like, oh, okay. But very excited to see them adapt that for the screen. Then the fourth book I read this month was Mystery Knight, which is the third book and final book so far in the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms trilogy, or novellas. And again, by George R.R. Martin. The Mystery Knight I loved. I really loved the Mystery Knight. I thought again, I read it all in one sitting, so maybe it should go without saying every single one of these books I read in one sitting, including The Everlasting and the final book. So I did read it all in one sitting, except The Sworn Sword I didn't, so that's probably why that went down a bit. But this one I did, and I loved it. It really sucked me in immediately. I love the mystery. How do I even explain? So it's Dunk and Egg again. They're on a journey. I can't remember. I think they're thinking about going to the wall, or just going north and joining the Stark Lord. I'm not sure what his name was, whoever the Stark Lord was at the time, joining him and fighting someone. I think the Iron people of the Iron. I can't say it. I can't say ours. Anyway, that's not important. They're heading towards the wall, but then they run into this group of lords and knights who are going to celebrate a wedding, or I think, yeah, celebrate a wedding. That's how you say that. They're going to celebrate a wedding. And Dunk and Egg just kind of tag along because there's a lot of hedge knights going, and it is another tournament in like celebration of the wedding. So they're going to crash it essentially just to see what's happening. And there's I don't really think I can say more than that, but it's very interesting. It's much more in line with the story of the first one, if you know what the first story is about. Very much more bigger stakes again. It is very, it's anticlimactic, I guess. It's like huge high stakes that get finished in like a really silly way. So the stakes could have been higher, but you know, the stakes felt high, but there was no way that they were ever actually going to happen, if that makes sense. You could tell that the bad guys, I guess in quotes, because I don't know how bad they really are, but the bad guys had huge plans, but you knew that they were never even going to slightly get into it, ignoring the fact that, you know, obviously this is set before Game of Thrones, so you already do know that that isn't successful. But I don't know, even without thinking about that, you're like, okay, this is not going anywhere past this one day, which is kind of true. But it's, again, very, very nice. I will say the Mystery Knight did not make me cry until I got to the end of the physical book for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and I got to the bit where it's George R. R. Martin wrote a little thing, which is like the end of the beginning, because he's planning on writing more, and there's a whole thing about all the rest of their journeys, and then the last thing he says is keep reading George R. R. Martin, and I started sobbing. I think just because this all three together it's one of my favorite like physical books ever. I'm going to reread this many times, and even individually, the first one is my favorite book ever. I love it. I'm not sure, can you call something, is a book always a book, even if it's a novella? It would be, novel would be wrong to call it, but book is fine, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, the first one's definitely my favorite thing I've ever read, but all three together, they're great. I think if I had sat down and read them all back to back, all in one sitting, that would have been optimal, I guess. 353 pages. Yeah, and The Everlasting is like also about that. Yeah, it is about that. So I could have. I just didn't, I guess. But I gave The Mystery Knight 5 out of 5 stars as well. I loved the characters. I think that's something he does so well, is just introducing a character, and a paragraph later you're like in love with them. They're so well written. You love them so much already, like immediately, and you understand who they are on a fundamental level. It's so great. He just does such a good job of interactions between characters. I'm so excited to actually read Game of Thrones and see all the little character bits that I missed. But yeah, it was phenomenal, and I really liked it. All three are great. Overall, even though the third one got a 4.5, I would give the actual physical book 5 out of 5. Like all three together, 5 out of 5. They're really good. I really enjoyed them. And then the final book that I read in April, and yeah, I only read 5, which is probably much less than you would be used to seeing on BookTube. Again, I'm just starting. My goal of books to read this year is just 10, so I'm already halfway there in 1 month. Or in 1 month of reading. Obviously, it's the 5th month now, but I only read 5 books. I'm hoping to get, up it by 1 like every time, but I'm not sure. We'll figure out what we're doing as we go. But the 5th book that I read, and the final book that I read in April, is Sunrise on the Reaping. And people are probably going to be mad at me at this. I read the first 3 books, and then I read Sunrise on the Reaping. I've never read The Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. I have plans to. Obviously, I own it. I just really don't want to read something from the perspective of Snow. So I probably missed out on some things, but I do know the general story of it. I know spoilers. I know what happens in the end. So I know the ending. I know the general vibe. I know the general motivations. I would probably get so much more out of Sunrise on the Reaping if I had read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I just didn't. Okay, I didn't want to. And Haymitch was always like one of my favorite characters in the Hunger Games. I think when I was younger, he was my favorite character. As an adult, it's Katniss. Obviously, it's Katniss because Katniss is awesome. But I always had a special place in my heart for Haymitch, I guess. That's always kind of my favorite archetype, is the old mean asshole who has a tragic backstory. So yeah, I was much more excited to pick up Sunrise on the Reaping than the other one, and I'm so glad I did because it's so fucking good. I understand people complaining about certain things. I know people didn't like the fan service or whatever. I never felt like it was fan service. There was never a point where I was like, okay, you're just throwing this in here because they're a fan favorite character. It never felt like that to me. I think the characters that are picked, it's so clear to me that they would have been in that situation, that would have happened. It makes sense to me completely for everything. And I still think it fits perfectly with the trilogy. I don't think it screws anything up. A lot of people are complaining that it kind of makes Katniss less not special. I guess it kind of makes her special in that her descendants or whatever. I think that's stupid. I don't think that's true, because Katniss was still randomly picked. She was made the Mockingjay because of stuff she did in the arena. It was never about who her ancestors are, or who her family is, or what her district has done, or the fact that people before her have tried to destroy the system. That was never the point. She was picked basically at random, and she isn't even really... She's just the face of it. So it never really mattered to me what her backstory was, because it didn't matter to them either. She was randomly picked. She only ended up the Mockingjay because of her own will to live, basically, and to save PETA. That's the only reason that even happened. So I don't think it matters who her dad was, or who her dad was friends with, or, stuff about the district and the fact that they had tried to destroy the arena before. I don't think any of that matters, really. I get why people are upset, but I don't think it matters. And I really enjoyed the book anyway. I loved every part of it. I thought it was all great. It was fucking devastating. It was the hardest book to read out of all of the series. It might be because this is the first one I'm reading as an adult for the first time. I'm rereading The Hunger Games. None of The Hunger Games made me cry as an adult. I think because I already knew what was happening. I already knew about all of the little things. And I didn't really forget anything. So there was at no point where I was like, oh, this is... Well, obviously it's all sad, but there was no point where I was shocked and crying. Versus Sunrise on the Reaping, there are many moments where I was like, oh, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to read. Some of it's really devastating, very upsetting. And it's not got a happy ending, because why would it? It's The Hunger Games. I think it's got a bittersweet ending. But, even going into it, it's not going to be a happy ending, because you know where Haymitch ends up. You know that, he survives, obviously, because he's in the trilogy set in the future. And you know that his life sucks in the future, and he has no family or loved ones, so there's not many ways that this could go that wouldn't be a tragedy. And it's still so devastating to watch it all build up to what is the end, the ending, I guess. You already know how he's going to be in the end, and then watching it all slowly build up and realizing, okay, that's why he's like this, is very upsetting. But it's, I don't think I even explained what the premise of the book is. It's Haymitch Abernathy, the mentor of District 12, his games, how he survived them. It was the second quarter quell, I think, so the 50th Hunger Games, 25 years before, or 24 years, I guess, before the 74th Hunger Games, which is Katniss's games. And it is a quarter quell, which means that they change the rules a little bit. And for this one, it's double the tributes. So it's 4 people from each district instead of just 2. So 2 girls, 2 boys. And it is devastating. I can't really say anything else other than that. It's really sad. But it's great. I think it adds so much to see how long everything was building up. Like, I think people were kind of upset about that it wasn't like a quick decision to overthrow the Capitol, but like, of course that would take decades. That would take so long, so many people, so many years of work, and I love that we actually got to see that. We got to see all the little things that were slowly building up throughout the years, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I cried a lot. I was sobbing by the end of it. The ending really made me cry, like, a lot. But this one I also gave a 5 out of 5. I think I've given every Hunger Games book a 5 out of 5. I've only reread the first Hunger Games and half of the second one, but when I read them as a kid, I did give every single one like full stars. So I don't know, I guess in a reread we'll see how that holds up. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I'm kind of scared for it, but I also think I'm gonna love it anyway. I did recently pick it up to look at it, and I realized that it's not even from Snow's point of view. It's in third person, just inside his head, or unless the first chapter is in third person and the rest is in first person. I'm not sure, but that definitely made me more eager to read it, I guess, because I really just don't want to be in Snow's head. He's not, I don't know, I do love an evil guy with a tragic backstory, but I know that Snow's backstory isn't tragic. He's just an asshole. He's just like that. I mean, he has a sad backstory, I guess, but it's not enough for me to be like, okay. And that wasn't the point. I know that the point was not to show him be redeemed or anything. It wasn't to make you like him. It was just to have, I don't know why she wrote it, but it wasn't to redeem him, which I do know, but that's the only reason I like those sorts of stories, is the redemption or the realization of why someone's like that. I'm not sure if I'm going to get that with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but I don't know. Maybe I would if I actually read it. But that is every single book that I read in April, and also this year. So I'm halfway through my goal of 10 books by the end of the year, which I'm excited about. I'm going book shopping next week, so the 5th of May. I'm very excited about that. So I will be adding a lot more books to this bookshelf by then. And once I've done that, I've made like a TBR jar, and I'm going to do a video on that to pick out the books I should read for May. But if there's any that you're like, oh, you need to read that, let me know. I will say, so I'm 60 pages into The Will of the Many. It's okay. I like it so far. It's very interesting so far, but I picked it up a few days ago, put it down, haven't picked it up since, which doesn't really mean anything because I did that for a few books on this list and a few books that I've really loved, but I don't know, I just haven't picked it up again. I'm also in the middle of reading The Hobbit for my ASMR channel, and I'm like 30 pages into Frankenstein. Haven't picked that up again. That'll be a while before I pick that up. It's really good, but it's hard to read. But that is kind of all the progress that I've made inside of books. So if there's any that's not on that list that you're like, you need to read, let me know. But that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in the next one.